and that is the MJF interview. So he interviewed Chris Van Vliet recently, and this was leading up to the show in Australia. And I wasn't sure if I didn't get a chance to see it yet. I plan on watching it after this recording in the evening. But was the ring actually that small, or did people like Photoshop that thing? Because like someone shared a screenshot of Grand Slam in Australia, and the ring was like this big. And I don't know if it's because of the logistics of when they took their show to Australia. Like apparently it's like difficult to transfer a ring or whatever, so they have to use somebody's ring in Australia. And it ended up being this size. I don't know. So I'm not sure what that ring was, but yeah, so this interview with MJF, so he had a lot of interesting segments talking with Chris, and I wanted to touch on some of the things that he talked about and get your guys' thoughts. So in this interview, MJF talks about the good versus great philosophy, and he explains that the curse of being great is that you aren't allowed to have an off night, and if you stumble once, people call you horrible, whereas good wrestlers in quotes are allowed to slip up. So now Chris, let me ask you, do you agree with MJF's definition of greatness in wrestling? Do you feel like the audience holds elite workers like MJF to an unfair standard compared to like some other people in the roster?
I mean, if it's, I guess, especially if they're always claiming how great they are, but I feel like every wrestler does that. Um, I feel that fans, I could only speak for myself. I would say I treat them just as much as anybody else on the roster. You know what I mean? I don't feel like I find myself like expecting just way more out of an MJF or anybody of his caliber than anybody else down the card. Same rules apply, I feel.
So you complain evenly, no discrimination. You don't put a bigger spotlight like on a CM Punk versus like, I don't know, you give Xavier Woods a free pass.
No, yeah. I mean, it's all the same, or depends on how I'm feeling that day, to be honest. But
Yeah.
yeah, generally speaking, I would say it's even.
David, how about you? How do you feel about that comment of him saying like the curse of being great? Like someone of MJF's caliber, it feels like those kind of elite workers are held to a higher standard, and he feels like that might be unfair. That's why he calls it a curse compared to like other wrestlers who are good, but they don't get the same flack that like MJF does.
I see it. I definitely see it. Do I feel the same way? No, I think I spotted and distribute the jokes evenly. I
Yeah.
think it is a show and it does happen. But I do see where he's talking about it, and I do know that it does affect like other people differently. Like definitely externally, it's a thing amongst fan bases where it's like, oh, I thought you said about insert name here was so good.
Yeah.
And
I do think, yeah. I mean, like, just and the internet wrestling community is not like the be all end all. I feel like wrestling companies, to a certain degree, do use that as a data point in terms of like where the conversation is online. And WWE and AEW are both guilty of that. But I do, so I do see in some respects that there is some bigger complaints on people like, CM Punk or Finn Balor or MJF
so
or Jey Uso. Yeah. I mean, like people who win, right? And who
yeah.
are at the top. You get the brunt of it because you're in the spotlight. So people will point their pitchforks at you because you are the current favorite for the company. So, I think, those kind of people who are in those positions get more of the flack because you do have that spotlight. I don't think that is to say that people don't complain about undercards or don't, because honestly, social media and all that stuff, and we've had this conversation before, people will find things to complain about and be mad about regardless. I think if you're at the top or the bottom, sometimes you do see it, more frequently with people who are up there. But I feel like there's just people complaining about everybody all the time. So I don't agree completely with MJF that there's an unfair standard. I think a lot of people just complain about anything. So, and moving on, he also talks about, his recent roles. He wasn't as frequented in AEW this past year because he had so many different films that he was in. And he was talking about his roles in the Iron Claw, Violent Night 2, if anybody saw that, and Happy Gilmore 2. And he mentions that he doesn't feel he has to choose uh, between his roles because modern makeup can cover any wrestling boo-boos he gets before going back to movie sets. So, getting smacked with a kendo stick and you are required to film for a specific role, movie magic can cover that up pretty easily. I mean, sometimes you get those weird edits where, like, I think it was in Superman when Henry Cavill was filming for something that required a beard or a mustache, and they had to film a specific segment. They
James
CGI'd as a
Bond.
mustache. What's
I
that?
think it was James Bond. He had a mustache as like a villain or some shit.
Yeah, and then they CGI'd his mustache out from the was it Batman versus Superman? I don't even remember which one it was. But yeah, if folks will remember that post edit removal. So it doesn't always look great, but it's to say that there is an opportunity to cover that kind of stuff up. So we've seen many wrestlers leave for Hollywood. You've had Rock, Cena, and Batista, I think, being the most prominent examples of that. And MJF claims that he could do both simultaneously at a high level. So I think this is kind of a shot across the bow for folks like that. So, Chris, do you feel like it's actually possible to be the face of a major wrestling promotion while maintaining a full-time acting schedule, or do you feel like one will eventually have to give?
Yeah, I feel like just like anything else, one thing has to be one thing will suffer. So it's like a jack of all trades, master of none type of deal. If you put all your eggs in the basket, you can only be great if you're putting all your effort, I feel, into that one thing. But that's part of his character is that it doesn't matter. He will, call your bluff and just be like, yeah, I'm the greatest in anything. Right. But realistically, I would say if you're full-time wrestling and expecting to be on top, and then you're trying to also be a movie star, like one or the other will definitely suffer, I feel.
David, what do you think? Do you think you can be the face of a major wrestling promotion and act full-time, or do you feel like one has to give?
I think it's a little different now because they don't have house shows throughout the week.
True.
Uh, Meaning just like, for example, like Cody was pretty vocal about it, and so is Jay, where they're just like, I don't get the reps I used to. Oh, I mess up. Yeah, I'm gassed. I'm not going 4 days a week anymore. I'm not going 5 days a week anymore. I
Yeah,
think in
yeah.
that sense it'll help. But like, for example, like an MJF who might be a champion, I can see where like being a champion during major filming would interrupt something just
Mhm.
because of the fact that like media obligations and things like that. But I think that these new guys, the current crop of wrestlers can handle that schedule better than like say anybody before the once a week, twice a week type
Mhm.
gig.
And to use like The Rock and Batista as examples, I feel like is a bit unfair because the schedules then did require you to be on the road almost all the time. And like you both mentioned, the house shows was a big thing for WWE in terms of their touring schedule, and that has been like diminished considerably. They still have like their holiday tours and they do their European and Japan tours that are untelevised events, but like the domestic house shows and all that stuff that they used to is much less, few and far between. And I think that gives people like Cody Rhodes an opportunity to film for Street Fighter, or Roman Reigns to do. I mean, Roman Reigns. I mean, he's in a current part of his career where he doesn't show up regularly in WWE anyway. So he's able to do that. And it's CM Punk is another example, Zootopia, Z-Bros, all that fun stuff.
Z-Bros.
Z-Bros or some shit like that, as Roman Reigns said. So I think anyone has a better opportunity to be the face like Cody Rhodes has done or is doing, like Roman Reigns is doing, and still have these major roles. I think it is more doable now. So I don't know if one has to eventually give, but I think as you get older, they will just naturally stop wrestling less, just because, I mean, it takes a toll on your body, and like just movie acting, just to be real, like doesn't as much. Like wrestlers, yes, they act, but they also are their own stunt people, and they actually have to put themselves through tables and all that stuff, you know, like it's not just filming a movie, you know. So there was also discussion about that famous bidding war of 2024, where MJF was kind of teasing that WWE was courting him to potentially jump ship to WWE, and MJF kind of discussed his contract situation. He admitted that there was significant interest from WWE, and they even had some quote unquote nice calls with people high up in that company. However, he ultimately chose to stay and put AEW on his back, to quote what he said. So MJF said that he stayed because he wanted more leash and to be the main character of his own company. Do you feel like, Chris, his legacy would be better served as the quote unquote biggest fish in AEW, or by eventually proving he can conquer the WWE system?
I mean,
for his legacy.
I feel like, I mean, I mean, look at Kenny Omega. I would say, you know, one of the wrestlers that never had a WWE career, and he's done quite well for himself as far as his legacy and how people kind of look at him. I don't think MJF necessarily needs the WWE machine, but I also think if he did want to go there, they'd have to really clear that roster, because it's pretty stacked, and just kind of like throwing him in there, you know, I feel like he would just kind of be mute. I don't think he'd have the same pop as he does in AEW, because he can be that big star, I feel, in AEW because of, you know, it being that second company, right, versus WWE. So I can't see, I could see it if it's done right, but in its current state, I would say he's better off being in AEW.
Yeah, David, what do you think? Do you feel like for his legacy, you think it would be better served as being this, you know, big kahuna AEW, or maybe proving that he can conquer the WWE system would make the star
I
bigger?
I think he'll end up doing like early 90s Flair. I don't think he like necessarily needs WWE. I think he'll do it to say he did it. That makes sense.
I agree. I think that makes sense. And you both brought up people like Ric Flair or Kenny Omega or even like Sting. I mean, up until he went to WWE, but at that point, he didn't need that for his legacy. Like everyone knew who Sting was, and how much of a legend he was and is. And he did not need to jump over to WWE to be that in people's eyes. You know, he went to WCW, they went under, then he went to TNA, and through all that time, people still knew who Sting was, how big of a person he was, without ever jumping ship to WWE. And WWE, you know, it didn't make him a bigger like legacy act. I feel like a lot of people probably forgot that time that he was in WWE. I feel like it might have been like what, a year and some change maybe, and then he got injured by Seth Rollins when he threw him against a turnbuckle, and then he went to AEW for a bit, and you know, got more of a added more to his repertoire and his legacy. So I mean, like Sting is a great example. Kenny Omega, honestly, I don't know if he's ever going to go to WWE at this point, or even if he wants to. You know, and then to Chris, to your point, there's so many people that they have on the roster now that are kind of in that age bracket. But yeah, I mean, just all the star power they have. I don't know, like if Kenny Omega would get lost in the shuffle, or if he doesn't get lost in the shuffle, someone else would because he's there, because they want to like appease him and give him something, so maybe someone else gets pushed down. People already complain about LA Knight not getting the push that he deserves just because of all these other people that they are putting over LA Knight. So, I don't know if MJF necessarily needs to go to WWE. I think just for myself, selfishly, that'd be so interesting, especially if there was a universe where CM Punk was still wrestling there and they could do a sequel to that rivalry they did in AEW. That would be very interesting, and it would be a money-making match. But again, they're in different parts of their careers right now. And I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon. And I think Tony Khan knows that that would be a really bad thing for his company. And I think he's going to give them more money than WWE probably would, because I think Tony Khan can't afford to lose an MJF. So we'll see. But there were some other interesting tidbits, and he talked about how MJF himself is a raging traditionalist and criticizes his own generation for wrestling the exact same way, which he finds boring. He prefers the old school psychology of the territories, and that's something that he talked a lot about to Chris Van Vliet in that interview. Chris, how do you feel about that comment? Is MJF right that modern wrestling has become too predictable? Do you feel like his old school approach, and he does a lot of things that you can see from a Ric Flair, poking eyes, biting, a little slower pacing. Does that actually make him stand out more than the high flyers of today?
I mean, it definitely does amongst the wrestlers that decide to use that faster style. But I mean, you could say the same thing about taking it back 30 years and then how everybody else was wrestling about the same way. So it's the way of the world, you know what I mean? So it helps him in this case to make him unique in that sense. So, but it's just the style of the time, right? It was the style of the time.
David, what do you think about that old school approach that he tries to put in his moveset, and then saying that modern wrestling's been a little too predictable?
Modern wrestling is pretty fast paced and pretty predictable. You see somebody fall out the ring, you know that there's about to be some type of tope. It's not going to be a baseball slide. The dude's not going to go out and chase him. He's not going to wait in the ring to call him back in. He's going to go out there and swanton out.
Yeah, he's going to huddle with his other guy that maybe they were wrestling with, and they're waiting to catch the other guy who's about to jump over that top rope or turnbuckle. So, yeah, I mean, to that degree, I agree with that sense. I think there just has to be, again, there just has to be a nice mix. And I do think maybe there is a little more leaning in one specific style. And I do think that there is absolutely room for that Ric Flair style. I think Gunther is a good example of that. MJF, of course, is trying to imitate that, that kind of style. I think is needed because it does get boring when there's no variety. I agree with that. Too predictable. I mean, yes, to some degree, because I think sometimes when we're watching some of these matches, sometimes you can almost predict the next move or the finish or the way that they go about that match, like what the next person's going to do. So to that sense, sure. And I do think there could be a little more creativity. And if it requires peppering some old school approach, yeah, I think that makes sense. And of course, he also talks about, I mentioned the CM Punk rivalry. MJF in that interview admits that he wouldn't piss on CM Punk if he was on fire. And that's his quote. And MJF learned the difference between being good and great from him and Cody Rhodes. So despite that, he said that, but he said that he learned the difference between being good and great. And MJF credited Cody Rhodes with getting him signed and Punk with sharpening his promo skills. And looking at MJF's current kind of, final boss persona, who do you see, Chris, is more of an influence? Who do you see more of an influence from when it comes to MJF? Do you feel like it's Cody's corporate leader style or Punk's unfiltered antagonist style? Who do you feel like he's more inspired by?
I would say definitely Punk. Like he was always a loudmouth, but I feel like he fine tuned himself, if according to him, if he was giving those two examples. But I definitely see CM Punk more in MJF than I do Cody Rhodes.
Hmm. David, what do you think? Do you feel the same way?
In
More
programs, in programs, and when he's promoting programs, I see Punk like in the sense of like, in-ring mic or on TV mic, and then like say if he has to cut a promo on whoever he's going against at a pay-per-view at a say on like a talk show, like he does really well at ripping them in half in that way. But it's also kind of strange because he also has like a really good Cody Rhodes face where he will be like, Tony's a great boss. I call him a fucking mark, but I still think he's a good boss. AEW's got the best locker room in the world, but I think these three are schmucks, but I can't complain about the other guys and kind of shit like that.
Right. He's got the attitude of Punk when it comes to his mic work and that approach, but I do see that Cody Rhodes, John Cena streak in him, like in terms of being a company man. And just the way that he goes about those specific things, like the movie industry, and I'm going to go a little bit further into that interview. He talks about how he's kind of a psycho about looking at minute by minute ratings and ticket sales to measure success, and that's kind of stuff that you've also seen John Cena talk about. Like if you guys remember, I think he was doing that Cody Rhodes interview after he retired. He mentioned like after his retirement match, they went back and he did like a whole cheers thing about like just the house and the amount of like revenue and all that kind of stuff that they brought in that evening. So I think MJF is also in that same mindset where he looks at it from like, a numbers approach and how many people, how did we sell the house? And all that kind of stuff, all those metrics, I think is something that you see in a Cody Rhodes and a John Cena and an MJF. And he also talked about, and this is one thing that Becky Lynch kind of insinuated in her tweet, talking about a forbidden door, but he also talked about working with Becky Lynch because I think they were both in Happy Gilmore 2, right? I forgot what Becky Lynch's role was, but they both were on the same set. And despite his usual mean-spirited persona and his habit of, basically crapping on anybody, MJF did go out of his way to praise Becky Lynch and saying that Becky Lynch rules and saying that anyone who doesn't like her can go fuck themselves, quote. And MJF is, of course, notoriously protective of his character, kind of stays in character when he, as much as he can, kind of like The Undertaker did to a certain degree until he created his own podcast. Yet he breaks it to defend a top WWE star. Do you feel like that signifies mutual respect among people like a Becky Lynch, regardless of company lines? Or do you feel like MJF is just showing a rare glimpse of his real life professional friendships? Like, do you think that they're super good friends after they filmed Happy Gilmore?
I'm sure
he's just praising a fellow heel.
I'm sure they've exchanged words, and then also like he was just at like the Super Bowl, so he happened to see like Seth Rollins and herself there, so I'm sure just keep the spirit alive.
True. It was about the same. It was about the same time too. There was a bunch of wrestlers there at the Super Bowl. I don't know. I mean, they have the money for it, obviously.
Well, they all work for Fanatics.
Too. That's true.
AEW is like literally part of the NFL because of Tony.
Yeah.
And are plugged in, I should say. And then Fanatics on the WWE side, you just call one of those reps and they're like, oh yeah, we got Super Bowl tickets for you. Show up to a card show.
You think they get discounts like the green shirt guy?
Oh yeah.
Get a bit of a discount just for working. I mean, you got to have some kind of company perks, right? So, yeah, I mean, interesting interview. I think if folks have not gotten a chance to see this specific interview, I do think it is one of MJF's most honest interviews that he's done, because I feel like a lot of the times he really stays in that like heel character, but he actually gave some really good, insightful answers. In this interview with Chris Van Vliet, he was like joking, or maybe he genuinely didn't remember, but I think he was joking that he never interviewed with Chris Van Vliet before, and was like saying, I don't remember that happened. So I think it was just playing a character, because in this iteration of where MJF is, he really did actually do quite a great job in that interview. So folks, go check it out. But we can move on to